Hi everybody. Today our lecture focuses on release work and stretching. So you're going to need your blue packet, something to write with, and if you have something like a little rubber ball or an older tennis ball without a ton of air in it, a little bit squishy and soft, something like that. If you don't, just watch me do it. You can still get the information without actually participating. And then you're going to need a yoga strap or an old belt or a jump rope, something like that that you can use to stretch. All right. So using your blue packet with the movement principles on it. And remember, this is the last lecture. Everything, those last 6 movement principles will be the focus of this second quiz, but it is cumulative. All right. So a lot of times, especially in today's day and age, people put a lot of emphasis on work, on lifting, on getting stronger, really hitting exercise pretty hard, focusing on strength and power. And anything that has to do with how sturdy we are, that stability piece that we've talked about several times over the semester, and mobility, the way that things move, right? The ability to move without restriction, that sort of gets pushed off to the sidelines. It feels like it's a waste of time, kind of the icing on the cake. If I have time to stretch before or after, I will, but otherwise I'm just going to get to the work part of my workout. So, but actually it's totally opposite of that. We need to have a full range of motion, right? The ability to move in all planes without any restriction so that we get better results, right? If something is out of alignment, that causes issues. If our muscles, especially what I'll say on the front side of the body, are tight or overworked, usually overwork happens on the back side, if we can relax those muscles, so I'm going to sort of demonstrate, if I'm super tight on the front side of my body and everything on the back side is stretched out, my posture really suffers. And we talked about posture last time. But we can, if we loosen things up, if we stretch and release things, it improves your posture. It improves the way that your legs look, right? They get a little more toned appearance. And also we get a flatter appearance on our abs. Often, as I alluded to a second ago, any sense of tightness comes right before an injury. So I'm tight here all the time in a particular area, and I continue to do my same workout without adding in release work or stretching, and eventually I'm going to get an injury in that area where I've had that tightness. A lot of times, especially if we're doing the same things over and over again, I'm thinking of an occupation or a hobby, right? I have my device, or I have a job where I have to do something on a table. It causes tightness, right, over a period of time. A lot of us are out of whack. We're not balanced. We're not able to move fully. Once we sort of release things, stretch things out, we can come back into alignment. We talked about that in the posture section of our movement principles. Once we get back in alignment and everything is able to work equally, the way they're meant to work in conjunction with each other. Remember we talked about the way the rotator cuff can sort of get out of alignment and cause issues. Once all the muscles, in the case of the rotator cuff, those 4 muscles, in the case of the body in general, once all my muscles can work equally, things can relax. They don't get overstretched or overtired. And the things that are meant to be working, work, and the things that are meant to be able to let go are able to let go, right? You don't have to hold tension in particular areas. So as you might suspect, any tightness limits the range of motion, and it prevents muscles from working correctly. Again, if you use the shoulder as an example, if one of those rotator cuffs gets out of whack, I might not be able to move my arm up, right? So it limits the way my shoulder works. So in a second, we're going to do a couple of things as far as release work. You'll need your mat, and these are just simple little things. And then we're going to move on to stretching. At the time of stretching, that's when you're going to need your, the release work, you're going to need the ball, and the stretching portion, you're going to need that strap. So I'm going to rearrange things here just a little bit, and we're going to talk about release work for a moment, or probably more than a moment. All right, so I think I'm going to come down to kneeling for a second anyway back here. Let's, just so that you can see me. So let's just take your nose and pretend like you're going to draw a circle. If your nose is a magic marker, you're going to draw a circle in the air or on the wall in front of you. We've done this in class before, right? We did it early on just to assess or to look at if you had any tightness. Good. Now we're going to reverse that circle and go the other direction. Nice. All right, so one example of release work. And let's come down to your mat and lie down on your back. We're going to take that pelvic clock. Again, we've done this in class before. I had a paper plate that had numbers of the clock face on it. It's that example. So pretend like that clock face was on the belly button. The center of your clock face is on the belly button. And let's just imprint at 12 o'clock. And this is a nice way to just stretch out or release the low back. And now let's move to the right over to 1 o'clock, keeping your knees nice and still. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Now the weight should be right underneath your tailbone. We're going to come up the left side of your body. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now we're going to go the opposite direction. So we're going to start at 12 o'clock. So underneath your, probably the end of your breastbone on the back side of the body. So 12 o'clock. We're going to move to the left now. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And we're going to keep coming around now up the right side. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice. And now we'll release the knees just a little bit. My knees were both bent, my feet on the mat. I'm going to take my hand and put it on top of my right knee or around my right thigh, depending on what works for you. And without using the muscles of your hip, I want you to just circle. We're going to make the arm muscles work to circle the right hip. So you'll see that it looks like I'm drawing on the ceiling with my right knee, and I'm controlling that drawing with my hands. Right, so the hip, I could do it without, but it becomes a total different exercise. All right, reverse your circle on that right knee. And just let your arms dictate where this leg goes, that hip goes. The knee is sort of what looks like it's moving, but you're creating the movement in the hip socket. All right, set that foot down and pick up the other one. We'll just take notice. Is one side a little bit easier to draw a symmetrical circle? Again, let your arms do the work and finish the circle and go in the opposite direction. Good. All righty. Nicely done. Set that down. Set that foot down, and let's come on back up. So, I'm going to do two things here. Before we begin to move, we're going to just sort of check in with our body. I haven't stretched at all today. It's about noontime when I'm videoing this. I've exercised, but I haven't really stretched. So I'm going to fold forward, and we're just going to look at where my hands are in relationship to the floor. My legs are nice and long, but my knees are not locked. Hopefully my hips are right over my heels, and my hands are just going to hang heavy. I'm not going to push things. I'm just going to let gravity do its work. All right, so we'll make a mental note where your hands or your fingertips are in relationship to the floor. All right, and then come on back up, and now you're going to take your pink ball. We're going to stand on your left foot with the ball in the front of the left foot. So if you look from the side view, my right foot is ahead of me, my left foot's behind me. And we're going to take that ball. I'm going to put the toes of my right foot down on the mat. And I'm going to put that pink ball underneath my heel. And now I'm going to sort of move like a windshield washer left to right and sort of rub or roll across my heel. Now, if you have any issue with plantar fasciitis, and I'll talk about that more in just a second. If you have any sensation of discomfort on the sole of the foot, you're going to keep this really super light. I don't want it to be painful for you. So fascia. So for fascia, imagine, keep squiggling left to right, is a webbing-like material, kind of like those bags that onions come on in the grocery store, that covers each muscle group or each muscle, and it should be nice and supple. You can still that side-to-side motion for a second. It should be nice and supple, liquid, have a gliding effect where one muscle can glide across the other muscle. Now sometimes if we're dehydrated, we've had an injury, a muscle is super tight, hasn't been able to move, doesn't have that full range of motion, that fascia, that's that netting that covers the muscles, gets dried out and sticky and gluey. And instead of one muscle gliding over the other, they sort of bind together. And that's where you get that tightness. Now, our ability, remember at the very first part of the semester, for those of you who are in Pilates Matwork, we measured your flexibility. We did that sit and reach test. Now, for most of us, we can gain about 3 to 5% in flexibility with some work, right? We're born with a natural set point, but we do have a little bit of ability to increase our flexibility. The fascia, mobilizing that fascia, loosening it up, releasing the fascia is what gives us that additional flexibility. Now, the greatest collection of fascia is on the sole of the foot. It's thick. It's like it bands together. Also on the outside of the thigh, right? And so we can release the sole of the foot and create movement and release throughout the whole body. I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute, but we're going to move on. So I rolled left to right under the heel of my right foot, and now I'm going to take the ball on the pinky toe side of my foot, and I'm going to put a little pressure, and I'm going to roll up the pinky toe side of my foot, up one side, and then roll it back, and up and back. And again, if you have any discomfort, that plantar fasciitis, sometimes it gets inflamed, it gets irritated, it gets thickened, it's been injured, and or it's been stressed and therefore injured and irritated. Sometimes it gets, when we wake up in the morning, we take our first step and it's very painful. That's the plantar fasciitis that I was talking about. All right, still that movement. Now we're going to go up the middle of your foot toward the longer middle toe of your foot. We're just going to put a little tension and roll from the heel all the way up. They call that the excruciating first step, that plantar fasciitis. So if you have that, you're going to be super gentle. Now I'm going to transition my ball, and I'm going to roll up the big toe side of my foot across the arch. Good. You might hear a little cracky sensation. You work out or give your foot a little adjustment, kind of like going to the chiropractor for your foot. All right, take one more roll that way. And then we're going to transition the ball to the other side. Just think, though, or feel, or make a comparison, your left foot to your right foot, right? So it should feel a little more alive, a little more energized, a little more awakened. I'm going to, again, put my weight on my right foot, and now I'm going to take the ball under my left foot, and I'm going to squiggle left to right. So just back and forth, kind of like a windshield washer movement across that heel. Again, pay attention, how does the left foot feel compared to the right? We'll take about 3 more. And now I'm going to roll that ball up my pinky toe side of my foot. We're going to take about 8 or 10 passes here. Now this collection, the thickened collection of fascia on the sole of the foot here, is amazing how it affects the rest of the body. Now I'm going to go up the center of my foot. And you could do this sitting down. I like it standing up. It gives a little challenge to the muscles on the opposite leg, the one you're not working. Works the balance a little bit. But you can do it however it works for you. You can also use a smaller ball and roll the hands and forearms. There's a whole science to this. Fascia has been super hot in the last 10, maybe even, I'd say about 10 years. All right, now we're going to go up the big toe side. It's a hot field to study. It's, I know I have been to multiple conferences and continuing education programs on it. People can talk literally for days on end about the fascia. So roll up the arch, up that big toe side. We're going to take about 3 more. All right, I'm going to roll that ball off to the side. Now, if you were able to do that at home or while you're wherever you are watching, now let's come back. I'm going to sort of redo things. Now let's just see where we are. Were you able to get a little bit of release along the back side of the body, typically where we're tight? So for me, my fingers now touch the mat. My legs are not locked or bent. And so I gained quite a bit just from rolling my foot. You saw, right, what I was doing while we were here together. So that's release work. Now we're going to move on to stretching. I would suggest you write down these 3 types of stretching really quick on your blue handout before we get down and start doing the work. And then at some point we'll pause and you can fill in what the definition is. So I'm going to make my way to the mat. You're going to grab a pencil and something to write with. We're going to talk about the 3 kinds of stretches. So the first is called contract and release. So CONTRACT. And it's in no special order, just talking about 3 different kinds. And the next is active isolated stretch. ACTIVE. And then the word isolated, ISOLATED. And the third is a static stretch, and that is STATIC. All right, so grab your jump rope or your belt or your yoga strap or whatever you have. We're going to make our way. We're going to talk about those 3 kinds of stretches. We're going to do that illustrated by one muscle group. So we're going to stretch the hamstrings, those big muscles on the back side of the legs, but we're going to do 3 different stretches. So we'll do left and right with each stretch. So a lot of our Pilates exercises have inherent built-in stretching and release work, but I would say more so some built-in stretching. And in particularly, we tend to be tight in the hamstrings and the low back, and then the shoulders and the hips. Those are the main areas that get tight. So make your way down to your mat, lying down, have your blue packet handy, and place the strap, or whatever prop you're using, I'm going to call it a strap, over the ball of your right foot. And let your left leg be long. All right, so this first contract release. I have the strap, and I'm going to hold it with one hand. I'm going to lengthen my leg out. So my leg is going to be as long as possible. There's not bent and it's not locked, right? I can't lock my knee, but you know what I'm talking about. We've talked about that enough in class. All right, I'm going to pull my leg toward me as I push my heel away. So there's a contraction happening as I'm trying to resist pulling my leg. So there's an opposition happening. I'm trying to pull my leg this way as I'm trying to push it away with my heel. So we have a stretch reflex, kind of an emergency brake. And we need to hold a stretch for at least 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the bare minimum. So I'm pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling. And then I'm going to release that. And then I'm just going to come to pull. Right now, this time I'm not releasing with this leg, with my right leg. All right, I'm going to pick up my left foot and I'm going to put it in my strap. I'm going to reach my right leg long. We're going to repeat that. Now I can feel a big difference between my left and my right side. All right, so this first one is contract, release. And here's the definition of that. We contract the muscle as we resist. All right, so I'm pulling my thigh toward my chest as I'm pushing the back of my left leg away from me. So there's that push-pull, continuous, fighting with each other, but nobody gains any ground. Remember, we have to hold for 30 to 45 seconds. Now, in general, if I'm doing a hamstring stretch, my back, my pelvis is going to be neutral. Otherwise, we sort of push the stretch onto our low back. So let's try to stay in neutral. All right, I'm going to release that, and I'm just going to pull my leg toward me. Again, I notice a big difference in the amount of movement, the range of motion that I get. All right, the next stretch is called active isolated. And we're going to use the opposing muscle. If I'm stretching my hamstring, I'm going to use my quad muscle, this front of my thigh. I'm going to use that muscle to pull the muscle into a stretch. So my left leg is long, the strap's on my right leg. I'm going to have this strap over my foot, over my right foot, and I'm going to lower my leg to the mat. And then I'm going to help it up just a little bit with my strap, but mainly the front of my thigh is doing that movement. So I'm going to lower and pull it up, and I'm going to lower and pull it up. Good. When I say pull, I'm just bringing it up, right? I could do this without my strap, but we're going to use the strap in a second, so we might as well just leave it in place. So I'm going to lower and raise, again, keeping my pelvis neutral, about 10 times. I'm tightening the front of my thigh muscle, and eventually, here's our last one. I'm going to use it to pull this hamstring into a stretch. So this muscle contracts, and this one lets go. All right, we're going to hold that for a few seconds, and then we'll talk about the next, or the other side, and then the next type of stretch. All right, I'm going to release that. I'm going to slide my left foot into the strap. I'm going to release my right leg to the mat. I'm going to lower my left leg to the mat. My pelvis is neutral. I'm going to bring it back up. And we're going to, again, repeat this about 10 times. I would say a minimum of about 8. 10 or 12 is probably about right. Check in with your low back. Make sure you're not flattening. It takes some work to stay neutral here. I got a lot going on. All right, here's our last one. I'm going to pull up or lift up using my left thigh. I'm going to pull my left thigh close to my chest as I reach out through the back of my left leg, using that quad muscle on the front of my leg to stretch the back. So that is your active isolated stretch. All right, now we're going to go back to sort of the old school simple. Right foot strap on, left leg long. I'm going to just use my strap and pull my right thigh toward my right shoulder. Just a nice steady stretch. That's called a static stretch, S-T-A-T-I-C, static stretch. And again, we have to hold this for at least 30 seconds, preferably closer to 45 seconds. And I just continue to pull, continue to pull. As I pull, eventually, that hamstring muscle will realize I'm not trying to injure it, that things are okay, and it will gently begin to release with that reflex. That reflex will let go and allow a little bit of opening on the backside to happen. So this is that static stretch. Now, if you'll notice, we kind of did a static stretch at the end of both the other stretches. All right, I'm going to release that. But you can do this alone. I'm going to reach my left leg up to the ceiling with a strap on, my right leg long, my pelvis neutral. And I'm going to pull, pull, pull. Leg is long. I'm going to reach out through my heel. Right? The idea is to open up here. I continue to exert pressure as I pull my left thigh toward my left chest. I can bring my toes toward my nose or flex my ankle to get even more stretch, even more lengthening. I can feel this all the way down into my calf. The calf and the hamstring, kind of back here where I'm pointing, sort of loop around each other. So once one starts to go, the other one will come along with it. We'll take about 3 more breaths here. And then gently release. Let's just bring our knees to our chest and give ourselves a little rock. Let's just see, for heck's sake, we'll come back to standing. And let's just see if you feel any more open here. Again, hips right over your heels. And yeah, I can for sure see that I gained even more. That release work gave me some, but the stretching also gave me another couple of inches here. Alrighty. Okay, everybody. That is it. Watch for the associated workout. All right, bye-bye.